So, what is gang stalking and what is it all about? Well, it's also called organized stalking. It has nothing to do with street gangs. In order to best explain it, let's start at the origin of how gang stalking began and what the weapons used in it were meant for. So let's say we have a terrorist situation in which the police are notified. They can send a drone over there, and for many years they've been able to look in and listen in to what's going on in there. They might use something like x-rays, which would show them the skeleton of the people in there, and any metal would show up very bright white. They might even use something like radar, which has gotten so advanced that it can actually provide a 3D rendering of everything inside a building. Suffice it to say, there are many different tools for looking and listening into buildings, and they keep getting more advanced. Some of the newest technology that they have are direct energy weapons. One type is called an electrolaser and allows them to fire through walls. Another tool that they use is something called voice to skull, which allows them to communicate to people wirelessly through the air using microwaves. And it has been around for over 60 years. So, what is voice to skull? And where did it all begin? Well, around 1960, they discovered that people that were working around microwaves were hearing buzzes and clicks and tones in their head. Similar to the discovery of microwaves being able to cook things, we discovered that microwave could be used to transmit audio. This is known as the microwave auditory effect, or the Frey effect for the scientists who studied this. Within 10 years, they were able to reliably reproduce the human voice. This is why they call it voice to skull. At some point in time, magicians and mentalists picked up on this, and on America's Got Talent, there was a mentalist who had Tyra Banks think of numbers to use in her calculator to multiply them and add them and to come up with a long random number. The mentalist then played a video where he predicted that very same number ahead of time, and everybody was amazed. How did he do that? Well, he had someone in the rafters or backstage with a voice to skull device reading the numbers and operations to Tyra, because they also discovered that when the volume level is low enough, the audio transmission is indistinguishable from thought. So, when Tyra was plugging those numbers into her calculator that she thought of randomly, those numbers were actually being read to her. And had they turned the volume up on that, Tyra would have audibly heard those numbers and operations being read to her aloud. Kind of cool, right? Kind of scary though, right? This is highly manipulative. So, what are electrolasers? Electrolasers are a type of direct energy weapon. There are many types. They work by firing an invisible laser, which ionizes and charges the air, allowing electricity to pass through it, similar to lightning in nature. It can pass through walls and other barriers from hundreds of yards away, and it can electrically shock, or freeze, or burn, or vibrate, or push the victim. It does have a force behind it. So, back to our scenario, where there's a terrorist in a building. The police, from a drone, can use voice to skull to bridge an immediate communication between them and the terrorist. They can announce themselves, ask for what their terms are. They can also communicate with victims, maybe telling them to stay still and remain calm. They can also communicate with other potential victims, maybe asking them to leave if it's safe. And because voice to skull can be used to manipulate someone's mind, they can also subliminally suggest to the perpetrator that maybe they should surrender. In addition to these tools, there's also a projection technology that can pass through walls and blur someone's vision. It can also add additional imagery into it that can provide camouflage or cover for the SWAT team that may be approaching. Finally, they can use the electrolasers to shock and bring down the perpetrator. Yay. That's what these things are used for, or supposed to be used for. But how often do SWAT team officers get to use these weapons? I mean, they can do all these things, and surely they want to use them, but they only get to use them like one day out of the year, if that. Some of them may want to use these every day of the year, on duty and off duty. I mean, it's not like we haven't seen an abuse of police power over generations. So they take these drones and they go around town spying on people and fucking with them. They really like making people clash, so they'll get into somebody's head and they'll make them think that others are talking about them behind their back. Causing confrontation is very fun for them. This happened at my house, where everybody in my house went schizophrenic and paranoid. Some people even had episodes of psychoses. Then I lost my house in September of 2016, and I went to an extended stay, where I then began to hear voices. They were very annoying, and they were non-stop. I wondered if I was going schizophrenic. And then I started feeling shocks, and then vibrations, and then heat spots on my body. The voices would mock me during that time, and then 1 month later, I had left my phone in a person's vehicle who never returned it. And then the voices told me that the guy in 301 had my phone, and that he had hacked my Google account. When I got my replacement phone and did a Find Your Phone tool, I discovered it wasn't 301 or right outside it, and that the guy's email address linking to his Facebook profile was put in as my recovery email address. So even in a paranoid, delusional, schizophrenic state, I could not have suspected that or known that. And he wasn't the guy who stole my phone. That proved that these voices were real people to me. Still have doubts? Well, during this nonsense, I also got a text from Officer Mark McLeod with the Austin Police Department, who works on the Special Weapons and Tactical Team, or SWAT, who said, "I will do what I want, when I want." Oddly, the Office of Police Oversight for the City of Austin didn't find this alarming at all, nor did the FBI, or the Chief of Police, or the Sheriff. The FBI agent who got involved did nothing, and then after 2 months, I met with him again, and he was told he wasn't allowed to pursue my case. That's not suspicious at all, is it? So my YouTube channel focuses on the electrolaser attacks, documenting my pain and experiences, the voice of skull attacks, the projections, and then I also tell my story on it. These weapons were meant to fight terrorism, and instead they're being used to cause terrorism on our own homeland. And it's a new type of terrorism that affects us more than the type of terrorism we normally think of. Please watch and subscribe, and please forward this to as many people as possible. This affects every single person in the world.